lawyers around because they see all these figures in the blackboard, they hear the Coase Theorem, and that sounds like math, and I hate math, and I went into law to begin with just to avoid having to do any math. But despite all these numbers that you see here, you'll find out that the math going in is very, very basic. And we will fundamentally be solving a legal problem. If A causes harm to B, should A be liable for the harm it causes? And this is a legal problem. Think how many court cases revolve around this problem. Lawmakers, when they draft their bills, they constantly have to decide who is liable for what, and pretty soon you will become business lawyers, probably in international law firms, you'll be drafting contracts, and you constantly encounter this problem. You have to draft legal terms in your contract, deciding who is liable for what, to whom. So, there are three things we're going to talk about today. What the positive Coase theorem actually is, then we'll exercise a bit on the reasoning of the theorem, and then we'll talk about the normative Coase theorem. So, by now you're already familiar with the positive versus normative thinking, you know what efficiency is, you have an idea of what transaction cost is, so you know everything you need to know to understand this theorem. And the easiest way to explain it is actually by an example. And I was thinking what example to give you today just to talk about the theorem, and I thought we're in Italy, there's a lot of sunshine, Italians love hanging their laundry on their balconies. You know, you have these white bed sheets blown by the wind. So I thought we'll have a factory, and the factory is polluting because it's big chimney smoking and ruining the white laundry of the 5 Italian families that live around. And if we have to quantify the damages that each Italian family experiences, let's say these are 75 euros, and 5 families by 75, altogether they all experience 375 euros in damages. And at this point, if the Italians go to a lawyer and ask, okay, what should we do about this? And lawyers, no matter civil law, no matter common law lawyers, they will all think in terms of causation. And they will say, okay, the factory is polluting. Who's polluting? The factory. Who's the victim? The Italians. So we'll make them pay. And what actually Coase did is that he approached this problem in an entirely new way. He said, look, if you think of it, this is reciprocal. Because it is true that the factory pollutes and causes damages to the Italians, but it is also true that if these families did not live there, they wouldn't have experienced the damage. And just like we can say the factory inflicts cost on the Italians by polluting, we can say also that by wanting free air, the Italian families actually inflict cost on the factory. So it goes both ways. And the real question actually is, should the factory be liable to the Italians, or should the Italians be liable to the factory? And after reframing the issue in this totally anti-environmentalist way, then Coase went on to argue that we can say this is what we call today the Coase theorem, and a very commonly accepted concise statement of this theorem is that in a zero transaction cost world, the initial assignment of legal rights and liabilities does not make any difference at all to their final allocation. And if we have to say this simpler, this means that in a world of zero transaction costs, law does not matter at all. We'll always reach the efficient solution. People contract with each other and we always reach the efficient solution. And so let's look at this zero transaction cost world and let's give the Italians the right to have clean air. And then at this point, the factory has three options. It can pollute and pay damages in 375 euros. It can install a filter on the chimney, which costs 150 euros. Or it can choose to buy the Italian families electric dryers so that they do not hang their laundry on their balconies. Each electric dryer, let's say, costs 50 euros, so altogether the factory will spend 250 euros. And just by looking at the numbers, it's very clear what the factory will have an incentive to do. It will decide to buy the filter costing 150 euros, because in this way it will save 225 euros, and this is actually what the efficient solution is. But let's do the other way around. Let's say we'll give the factory the right to pollute. And then what are the choices that Italian families have? Well, they can choose to suffer. Or they can choose to buy the electric dryers themselves and spend 250 euros. Or they can choose to buy the filter for the factory, or equivalently to give the factory 250 euros and agree with the factory that it will install the filter. And looking again, what do you think the Italians will do? They will also choose to buy the filter for the factory, and this will be actually the efficient solution. So no matter who we give the right, we actually end up with the same outcome. And at this point, lawyers usually take it as a real offense to tell them that the law does not matter, because we all reach the same, all the time we reach the same result. But if you think of it, this is a zero transaction cost world. I mean, this is very unrealistic. What does this mean? That the Italian families did not have to incur any cost to find out what the dryers cost, what the filter costs. They did not have to incur any cost to get together and agree that they would buy the filter for the factory. They would not have to incur any cost to convene with the CEO of the factory and negotiate with him to install the filter. They did not have to incur any cost to monitor what the factory will actually do after that. And if the factory did not keep its agreement, they would not have to incur any cost to enforce the agreement. So this is very, very unrealistic. In our world, everything has a cost. So to assume a zero transaction cost world is actually a very, very, very strong assumption. And what we'll do now is to relax a bit, at least a bit, this assumption, and assume that if nothing else, it costs the Italian families to get together and agree on something, whatever, to agree on something. They have to spend time on this, probably even money, because il capo della famiglia has to miss one day of work to convene with the other couple to negotiate something. And we assume that this will cost each family 60 euros. And let's start from the beginning. We give the Italians the right to clean air. The factory has the same three choices: pollutes and pays 375 euros, or buys a filter, or buys dryers. And again, what will the factory do? It will decide to buy the filter and install the filter and stop that chimney from smoking. And this will be the efficient solution, because it will save 225 euros. Let's do it the other way around. We give the factory the right to pollute. And again, the Italian families have three choices. They can choose to suffer. They can choose to buy the electric dryers. Each family will spend 50 euros on the dryers, or if it chooses to suffer, it will suffer 75 euros in damages. Or they can choose to get together, which will cost them 60 euros, and contribute each family 30 euros for that filter, which they will give to the factory to stop the chimney from smoking. And this option altogether will cost them 90 euros. And if you look at the numbers, this option all of a sudden looks like very, very unattractive choice, because it's actually the most costly. And who would spend 90 euros so that he doesn't experience harm that costs 75 euros? So what the Italians will choose is that they will decide, okay, we'll stop hanging our laundry outside and we'll buy the dryers. And this will actually be a very inefficient way of solving the problem, because they will save only 125 euros. So, after relaxing our assumption, after going into this positive transaction cost world, we can actually state a more complicated version of this Coase theorem and say that in a positive transaction cost world, the initial allocation of rights and liabilities, how law assigns to whom the right, to whom the liability, actually matters a great deal, because the right then will be exchanged only until the gain exceeds the cost. And I would have to make another point here. I would like to make another point here, but before we do that, I would like to give you another example, and then we exercise a bit. Because whatever I'm going to talk about now is going to lead us to the next point, the normative Coase theorem. But I first would like to think about that.